Hey guys, tonight we slip into the squelchy, slow-paced world of a medieval snail farmer where ambition smells like damp earth and dreams crawl at half a mile an hour. Picture yourself ankle deep in a misty village field, the air thick with the tang of wet leaves and livestock. Dawn's barely cracked the horizon, and already you're eyeing a wriggling clump of snails, their tiny horns glinting like nature's laziest jewels. This is your new life. Congratulations, you probably won't survive the boredom. But there's something oddly hypnotic about these gooey little hustlers, and by the end of this tale, you might just wish you could trade your Wi-Fi for a pitchfork and some slime. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're chilling tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in the heart of a 12th century village somewhere in the soggy lowlands of Europe. Let's call it Mudwick, because that's what clings to your boots. The year's roughly 1180, and life here is a gritty mix of faith filth and feudal taxes. Snail farming, you learn, isn't just a quirky side hustle. It's a quiet obsession for some. Historians note that medieval folk raised snails for food medicine and even dye their mucus prized for soothing burns. But here's the weird bit. Some villagers swear snails are tiny oracles, their slime trails spelling out cryptic fortunes. You're skeptical, but the idea's got you hooked. Why snails? Why now? Mudwick's buzzing with rumors of a snail boom driven by a new appetite among nobles for escargot at fancy feasts. You're no noble, but you've got a patch of land, a rickety shed, and a hunch that these slimy specks could be your ticket to something bigger. You start by wandering Mudwick's lanes, eavesdropping on grizzled farmers and their snail talk. The local tavern, a smoky den of ale and gossip, is where you first hear the pitch. Old Gunter, a farmer with a beard like a bird's nest, claims snails are easier than pigs, tastier than turnips. He's half drunk, but his eyes gleam with conviction. You're not sold, yet snails seem like a lot of fuss for a creature that could lose a race to a rock. Still, you can't ignore the math. A single snail can lay dozens of eggs, and with demand, spiking a good harvest might buy you a new cloak or even a cow. Historians still argue whether snail farming was a peasant's side gig or a full-blown industry, but in Mudwick, it's the talk of the town. Your first step is scouting your land, a soggy, weed-choked plot behind your hut. It's not much, but it's got shade moisture and a low wall to keep out nosy goats. You imagine rows of snails munching happily, their shells gleaming like coins. Then reality hits. You know nothing about these creatures. Are they picky eaters? Do they escape? Do they even like each other? You chuckle at the thought of snails staging a jailbreak, but the fear's real. You've seen what happens to farmers who bet on bad crops last year. A turnip blight left half the village eating boiled nettles. No pressure, but failure here means you're the village idiot and Mudwick's not kind to dreamers. You head back to the tavern, hoping for tips. Gunter's there now, claiming snails thrive on moonlight and hymns. You roll your eyes. Medieval life's full of this nonsense, like slathering crocodile dung on wounds for healing. But another farmer, a quiet widow named Elfrida, offers saner advice. Snails love damp leaves, and hate direct sun. She warns you to watch for birds who'll peck your profits clean. You thank her, tossing her a copper, and trudge home, your head spinning with plans. Tomorrow, you'll start clearing your plot, maybe chant a hymn or two for luck. It's a ridiculous dream, but as you kick off your muddy boots, you feel a flicker of hope. These snails might just change everything. You wake to the damp chill of Mudwick, your breath fogging in the pre-dawn gloom. Yesterday's snail dreams still cling like the mud on your boots, and now it's time to figure out why this soggy village is so obsessed with these slimy crawlers. You pull on a scratchy tunic, grab a crust of bread, and head out to snoop around, determined to understand what makes snail farming the talk of every tavern and pigsty in town. The air smells of wet hay and distant wood smoke as you trudge through the village, your eyes scanning for clues to this gastropod craze. Mudwick's no bustling city. It's a huddle of thatched huts, a crumbling church, and fields that look like they're auditioning for a swamp. But there's a strange energy here, a buzz you didn't notice until now. You pass a gaggle of kids poking sticks at a snail, giggling as it retreats into its shell. Their mother, hauling a basket of leeks, snaps at them to stop wasting good stock. Stock. Since when are snails a commodity? You keep moving ears, pricked for gossip. At the village well, two women are chatting over their buckets, and you catch the word escargot tossed around like it's gold. One brags her cousin sold a sack of snails to a lord's cook for 3 silver pennies. 3 pennies, that's enough to buy a decent knife or a month of ale. Your pulse quickens, maybe old Gunter wasn't just drunk. Oh. Historically, snails were a medieval delicacy, especially during Lent, when meat was off the menu. Monasteries and noble kitchens gobbled them up, boiling or roasting them with herbs. But here's the quirky bit. Some locals believe snail slime can cure warts or even mend a broken heart. You overhear a tanner swearing he rubbed snail goo on his cracked hands and felt born anew. You snort sounds like the kind of hogwash Mudwick loves, like thinking a toad's burp predicts rain. Still, you can't deny the demand. Nobles want snails for their feasts, apothecaries want them for potions, and even priests are in on it, claiming snails symbolize humility or some such nonsense. Historians still argue whether this snail fever was driven by hunger faith or just bored peasants. But in Mudwick, it's all anyone talks about. You head to the market square, a muddy patch, where farmers barter eggs, cheese, and the occasional grumpy hen. There's a new stall today, draped in damp cloth, with a wiry man hawking snails by the basket. His pitch is half sermon, half sales patter. God's own creatures, plump as cherries. A small crowd gathers, and you notice they're not just peasants. There's a merchant in a fine cloak, probably sniffing out trade for the next town over. You sidle closer, pretending to inspect a turnip, and listen. The snail seller claims his stock came from a sacred grove, which you're pretty sure is just the bog behind the church. But the merchant's nodding, and coins change hands. You're starting to see the appeal. Snails are cheap to raise, don't need much space, and apparently sell faster than hot pies. Back at your hut, you sit on a creaky stool and think. Mudwick's snail craze isn't just about food. It's about status, superstition, and survival. You're no monk or lord, but you've got land and a stubborn streak. If you can crack this snail game, you might afford a new roof, or at least stop eating barley gruel every night. You laugh at the thought of snails making you rich, Imagine the village bard singing that tale. But doubt creeps in. What if the market crashes? What if your snails all die? You shake it off, remembering Elfrida's calm advice about shade and leaves. She's been at this longer than most, and she's not starving. Before bed, you step outside, the night air cool and heavy with mist. A lone snail glints on your wall, its trail shimmering under the moon. You stare, half expecting it to spell out your future, like the villagers claim. It doesn't. Of course, it's just a snail, not a sorcerer. But as you head inside, you feel a quiet resolve. Tomorrow, you'll start your farm, slime and all. Mudwick's betting on snails, and for once, you're betting with them. The sun's barely up, and you're already knee-deep in Mudwick's muck, ready to turn your snail dreams into reality. Yesterday's village gossip about sacred groves and wart-curing slime has you fired up. But now it's time to actually start this farm. You've got a soggy plot, a shed that leans like it's drunk, and a bucket of enthusiasm that's already leaking. Armed with Elfrida's advice, shade leaves no birds, you trudge out to your land, a stick in hand to poke at weeds and daydreams. This is it, your first slimy steps into snail farming. And you're half convinced you'll trip over your own optimism. Your plot looks less promising in daylight, more swamp than farm, with nettles that sting through your threadbare gloves. You start by clearing a patch, yanking out weeds, and cursing when a thorn snags your thumb. Medieval farming's no joke. Records show peasants worked dawn to dusk often for crops that barely fed them. Snails at least seem less fussy than wheat. But you're not sure where to begin. You recall Gunter's tavern ramblings about moonlight and hymns, which you dismiss with a chuckle. Imagine serenading snails while the village laughs. But Elfrida mentioned starting small, so you decide to gather some snails first, then figure out how to keep them from vanishing. You head to the hedgerows near the church, where damp moss and ivy promise snail hideouts. Sure enough, you spot a few their shells like tiny swirled pebbles. You scoop them into a clay pot, feeling like a kid collecting bugs. Here's the weird bit. Some villagers believe snails choose their farmers, only thriving for those with pure intent. You roll your eyes. Your intent is mostly not starving, but you whisper a mock blessing to your new pals anyway. Back at your plot, you dump them onto a bed of damp leaves, hoping they don't bolt. Spoiler, snails don't bolt, but you're still paranoid. Now for the tricky part, keeping them alive. Elfrida said, snails love moisture and hate sun, so you rig a crude shelter using sticks and a tattered sack. It looks like a toddler built it, but it'll do. You sprinkle water from a nearby stream, watching the snails perk up their tiny horns, waving like they're saying thanks. You grin, then remember birds. Mudwick sparrows are ruthless, and you've seen them decimate a berry patch in minutes. You scatter thorny twigs around your patch, hoping it's enough. Historians still argue whether medieval snail farms were open fields or walled gardens, but you're sticking with what you've got: a muddy square and a lot of hope. Feeding's next. You toss in cabbage scraps and wilted herbs, guessing snails aren't picky. Wrong. Half your snails ignore the cabbage and one seems to glare at you, though that's probably just its face's default setting. You laugh, imagining a snail food critic scribbling a bad review in slime. Elfrida warned they prefer soft greens, so you trek back to the hedgerows grabbing clover and dandelion leaves. This works better. Your snails start munching their jaws, making faint, creepy rasps. You sit back muddy and sore, watching your tiny herd. It's not glamorous, but it's yours. As dusk settles, you realize you've got maybe a dozen snails a shaky shelter and a long way to go. Mudwick's snail craze feels less crazy now you're starting to see the appeal of these low-maintenance weirdos. But doubts creep in. What if they die? What if no one buys them? You shove the thoughts aside, remembering the merchant at the market, his coins clinking for sacred snails. You're not in this for sacred. You're in it for survival. As you trudge home, a lone snail on your fence catches your eye, its trail glinting like it's mocking your hustle. You salute it. Respect to the OG, and head inside ready to collapse. Tomorrow, you'll build something sturdier. For now, you're a snail farmer, and that's enough. You're up before the roosters, your back aching from yesterday's weed-pulling marathon. Mudwick's dawn is a gray, drizzly affair, perfect for snails, but murder on your mood. Your dozen gastropods are still there, munching clover under their sad little sack shelter. But you know this setup won't cut it. If you're going to be a proper snail farmer, you need a real enclosure one that keeps your slimy investment safe from birds' rain and their own apparent urge to wander off. Today, you're wrestling with the medieval art of enclosure engineering. And let's just say, you're no castle architect. You start by assessing your plot, which looks like a mud pie after last night's drizzle. Your stick and sack shelter is sagging, and one snail's already halfway to freedom, leaving a smug little slime trail. You scoop it back, muttering about ungrateful livestock. Historical records show medieval farmers used wattle fences, woven sticks, and mud for pens, so you decide to try that. You gather armfuls of willow branches from the stream, bank their bark slick and cold. Weaving them into a low fence sounds simple, but it's like wrestling a wet basket. Your first attempt collapses, and you laugh, imagining the village bard singing of your great snail wall disaster. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some Mudwick locals believe snails hate crossing salt, claiming it's like a magic barrier. You're tempted to test it, but salt's pricier than ale, and you're not wasting it on folklore. Instead, you dig a shallow trench around your plot, hoping it'll slow any escapees. Historians still argue whether medieval snail pens were open or fully enclosed. But you're leaning toward Fort Knox. Birds are still your biggest fear. You spot a sparrow eyeing your snails like they're a buffet, and you lob a pebble to scare it off. Take that, feather face. Next, you reinforce the fence with mud and straw, patting it into place with hands that are now more dirt than skin. It's messy work, and you're starting to smell like the bog behind the church. You add flat stones at the base, remembering Elfrida's warning about snails climbing when you least expect it. Who knew snails were such ninjas? You step back, admiring your handiwork, a wobbly meter-high ring that looks like it could survive a stiff breeze maybe. You move your snails inside their shells, clinking softly as you set them on fresh leaves. They seem unbothered, which you take as a win. Now for shade. The sack shelter's a joke, so you scavenge planks from your shed, balancing them on sticks to create a lean-to. It's not pretty, but it blocks the sun, and your snails start exploring their horns, poking out like tiny periscopes. You grin, then notice a gap in the fence where a branch snapped. Panic spikes. Snails are slow, but you're not risking a jailbreak. You patch it with more mud, cursing your rookie mistakes. Medieval life's all about improvisation, and you're learning fast. As the day fades, you sit on a stump, watching your snails glide across their new home. The enclosure's not perfect, but it's yours, and it feels like progress. You think back to the market, that merchant's coins glinting for a basket of snails. If you can keep these critters alive, you might be onto something. A stray thought hits, what if you painted the fence with snail slime to bless it, like the villagers' weird superstitions? You chuckle, shaking your head. Let's not go full Mudwick crazy yet. For now, you've got a pen, a plan, and a flicker of hope. As you trudge home, mud flaking off your boots, you spot a snail on a rock, its shell catching the last light. You nod at it, half serious. Keep the faith, little buddy. We're in this together. The Mudwick dawn greets you with a damp hug, your new snail enclosure glistening under a drizzle that's more mist than rain. Your wattle fence and plank lean-to look like they survived the night, which is more than you can say for your enthusiasm after yesterday's mud wrestling marathon. Now, your dozen snails need to eat, and you're realizing these tiny gluttons are pickier than a lord at a feast. Today's mission: figure out how to feed your fussy gastropods without bankrupting your cabbage patch or losing your mind. You grab a basket pull on your least hole-ridden cloak and head to your plot, ready to play chef for creatures that move slower than village gossip. You start by checking your snails, their shells dotted with dew like miniature chalices. They're alive, munching the last of the clover you tossed in yesterday, but the pile's nearly gone. Medieval records show snails were fed greens, weeds, and even bran, but Mudwick's farmers are cagey about their recipes, like they're guarding a holy relic. You remember Elfrida's tip about soft leaves, so you dump some wilted lettuce from your garden. Half the snails ignore it, sliding over it like it's an insult. You mutter, "Picky, aren't we?" and imagine them demanding a menu with tiny quills. Here's the odd bit. Some locals swear snails thrive on herbs blessed by a priest. You're not trekking to the church for that nonsense, but you wonder if a sprig of parsley might shut them up. You head to the hedgerows again, basket swinging, scavenging dandelions, chickweed, and anything green that doesn't sting. The air smells of wet earth and faint lavender, and you're starting to enjoy the quiet until a crow caws, reminding you of your bird problem. You glare at the sky, half expecting a feathered raid. Back at the pen, you scatter your haul, and the snails finally show interest, their jaws rasping like the world's tiniest sawmill. You watch fascinated, then notice one snail's not eating, just sitting there like it's on strike. Great a diva snail. You nudge it with a stick, and it retreats, shell clunking. Historians still argue whether medieval farmers supplemented snail diets with grain or just let them graze. But you're not risking starvation. You toss in some crumbled oatcake from your pocket. The diva snail approves, and you roll your eyes. Now quantity's the issue. Your plot's small, and you can't strip every hedgerow in Mudwick without someone noticing. You think about planting a snail buffet, maybe clover or mustard greens, but that'll take weeks, and your herd's hungry now. You trek to the market, hoping to barter for scraps. The square's a muddy chaos of carts and shouting, and you spot the snail seller from before his Sacred Grove pitch, still drawing a crowd. You sidle up, asking if he's got spare greens. He eyes you smirking and says, "Snail farmer, eh? Good luck keeping 'em fat." He hands you a sack of wilted kale for a copper, and you trudge home feeling like you've been hustled. Back at the pen, you spread the kale, and your snails go wild, their horns waving like they're at a festival. You sit on your stump, watching them feast, and feel a flicker of pride. Feeding these weirdos is harder than you thought, but you're learning. You laugh, imagining telling Gunter you're now a snail chef. Bet he'd choke on his ale. As dusk creeps in, you notice the enclosure's muddier than yesterday, the rain turning it into a soup. You'll need to add straw or something, but that's tomorrow's problem. For now, your snails are fed, and you're not broke yet. You head home, the evening mist curling around you like a cloak. A lone snail on your path catches your eye, its trail a silver scribble. You step around it, muttering, "Eat well, pal. You're in too deep to quit now." Mudwick's morning is a soggy blanket, the kind that makes your bones grumble as you slog to your snail pen. Your enclosure's holding up, and your gastropods are plump from yesterday's kale feast, their shells glinting like they're flaunting their good health. Feeding them was a win, but now you're noticing something odd. Your snails aren't just eating and sleeping. They've got personalities. Today you're diving into the bizarre social secrets of your slimy herd, trying to decode their weird little world while keeping them from staging a gooey mutiny. You grab a stick to prod the pen's straw and settle in, ready to play snail sociologist. You start by watching them crouched in the damp grass like a monk studying scripture. One snail, a big one with a swirled shell you've nicknamed King Lumpy, always claims the juiciest leaf pile. Smaller snails veer away like he's got a crown and a bad attitude. You chuckle, snail royalty. That's a new one. Medieval naturalists like Albertus Magnus wrote that snails were simple creatures driven by instinct. But Mudwick's got its own theories. Here's the quirky bit. Some villagers swear snails form clans loyal to their own kind, and mixing shells from different patches causes chaos. You test this by nudging a small speckled snail into King Lumpy's turf. Sure enough, Lumpy slides over horns, waving like he's ready to throw down. You separate them, muttering, "Chill, your majesty." This social stuff matters, because a happy herd means more eggs, and eggs mean profit. You notice patterns. Some snails stick to the pen's edges. Others hog the center, and a few just vibe in a corner, like they're plotting a heist. You imagine them whispering in slime speak and laugh snail conspiracies, Mudwick's rubbing off on you. But there's truth here. If they're stressed, they'll hide in their shells, and your harvest will tank. Historians still argue whether medieval farmers noticed snail behavior or just tossed them in pens and prayed, but you're determined to crack the code. You rearrange the pen, adding extra straw piles to give the shy ones space. King Lumpy approves, claiming a new pile like it's his birthright. Then there's mating, because snails get busy. You spot two snails doing a slow, slimy dance, twirling like they're at a very patient ball. You blush, feeling like a creep, but this is your livelihood. Snails are hermaphrodites, meaning any two can make babies, which is great for business, but weird to watch. You recall a tavern tale about love darts, tiny spikes snails shoot during courtship. Sounds like medieval romance gone wrong, but you don't see any darts, just a lot of gliding and goo. You mark the pair's shells with a dab of charcoal, hoping for eggs soon. If they deliver, you might name their kids after Elfrida, assuming snails care about family trees. As noon hits, a drizzle starts, and your snails perk up, sliding around like it's a party. You wonder if King Lumpy's bullying or just leading, and whether the edge dwellers are loners or outcasts. You add more kale, spreading it evenly to avoid fights, and notice the shy corner snails finally eating. Progress. You're starting to like these weirdos. Their slow drama oddly soothing. A sparrow lands nearby, and you lob a clod of mud to scare it off. Nobody's snacking on your soap opera stars. As you stand, your knees crack, and you realize you've been crouched for hours, lost in snail politics. Mudwick's market looms in your mind. Those coins won't come if your herd's a mess. You trudge home, the mist curling around you, and spot a snail on a fence post, its horns raised like it's judging your work. You nod half serious. Keep your clan in line, you mutter. Tomorrow you'll check for eggs and pray King Lumpy doesn't start a revolution. The Mudwick air is thick with the scent of wet straw as you trudge to your snail pen, the morning mist clinging to your cloak like an overeager hug. Your enclosure's still standing, and King Lumpy's ruling his straw pile with the swagger of a tiny tyrant. You've cracked the code on feeding and decoded some snail drama, but now it's time to get serious harvest time. Those slimy socialites need to start paying rent, and that means collecting snails for market without squashing your profits or your sanity. You grab a clay pot and a basket, steeling yourself for the delicate art of snail wrangling. Spoiler, it's as fiddly as it sounds. You kneel by the pen, the damp earth soaking your knees, and peer at your herd. They're gliding over kale scraps, blissfully unaware of their impending job interview with Mudwick's cooks. Medieval records confirm snails were harvested for Lent, or noble feasts, often boiled or roasted with garlic. You're aiming for the market, where a good haul might fetch enough to fix your leaky roof. But here's the quirky bit. Some villagers insist you must harvest under a full moon to preserve the snail's virtue. You snort virtue. They're snacks, not saints. Still, the moon's half full tonight, and you're not risking bad luck in a town that believes in oracle slime. You start with the plumpest snails like King Lumpy, who's hogging a dandelion leaf. You reach for him, then hesitate. His shell's a beauty, and he's a leader. Maybe keep him for breeding. You pick a smaller snail instead. Its shell a tight spiral, and gently lift it. It retracts like it's giving you the silent treatment. You drop it into the pot, whispering, "Sorry, pal. It's business. One down, dozens to go." The trick is speed without stress. Snails clamp shut if spooked, and nobody buys a sulky gastropod. You move slowly, humming to keep calm, and imagine Gunter laughing at your snail whisperer act. After an hour, your pot's half full, but your back's screaming, and you've accidentally nudged a few snails into their shells. You switch to the basket for the next batch, lining it with damp leaves to keep them cozy. Historians still argue whether medieval farmers sorted snails by size or just scooped them up. But you're picky. You want the chubbiest ones for market, leaving the runts to grow. You notice a cluster of tiny eggs in the straw, like pearls. Jackpot. You leave them untouched, hoping for a new generation. Your charcoal-marked lovebirds from yesterday must have been busy. Then disaster. A sparrow swoops, snatching a snail before you can blink. You yell, flailing your stick, and the bird bolts, but the damage is done. You check the pen. 2 more snails are missing, likely bird breakfast. You curse, then laugh at the absurdity of playing hawk cop. You scatter more thorny twigs around the fence, vowing to get a dog or a very angry cat. The remaining snails seem unbothered, gliding along like nothing happened. You envy their chill. By noon, you've got a pot and a basket full, maybe 50 snails, enough for a decent market haul. You cover the containers with cloth, tying them tight. Snails may be slow, but you're not risking a great escape. Your hands are slimy, your tunic's a mess, and you smell like a bog, but you're grinning. This is your first real harvest proof. You're not just Mudwick's latest fool. You think back to the market, that merchant's coins clinking for sacred snails. Yours aren't sacred, but they're fat, and that's what counts. As you head home, a snail on a rock catches your eye, its trail a lazy scribble. You salute it, muttering, "Wish me luck, comrade. Tomorrow's market day, and you're ready to cash in, or at least not embarrass yourself." Mudwick's market day dawns with a clamor that could wake a hibernating snail. You're up early, your clay pot and basket brimming with yesterday's harvest, their shells clinking like tiny coins. Your enclosure's holding steady, and King Lumpy's still lording over his straw pile, safe from your market haul. Today, you're diving into the chaos of Mudwick's market, where you'll try to sell your snails without getting swindled, trampled, or laughed out of town. You sling the basket over your shoulder, grip the pot, and head out the air sharp with wood smoke and the promise of profit. This is your shot to turn slime into silver. The market square is a muddy circus carts, creaking hawkers shouting, and a stray goat causing havoc. You weave through stalls piled with leeks, cheese, and dubious holy relics, your boots squelching in the muck. Medieval markets were economic hubs where peasants bartered for goods and gossip, and Mudwick's no exception. You spot the snail seller from before his Sacred Grove spiel, drawing a crowd of wide-eyed buyers. Here's the weird bit: he's sprinkling his snails with water he claims is from a saint's well. You roll your eyes. Saint's well, more like ditch juice. But his baskets are emptying fast, and you feel a twinge of panic. Can your plain, non-holy snails compete? You find a spot near a baker's stall, the smell of fresh bread making your stomach growl. You set down your pot and basket, arranging the snails to show off their plump shells. Fresh snails perfect for Lent, you shout, mimicking the hawkers. A few passers-by glance over, but most keep moving. You try again, louder, adding tastier than turnips. A kid snickers, and you wink. Hey, at least someone's listening. Then a merchant in a velvet cap stops eyeing your haul. He's got the look of someone who knows coins, and you straighten up, hoping for a big sale. He pokes a snail, which retracts and frowns. Too small, he grumbles. Small. These are your best. You bite back a retort and point to the pot where your chubbiest snails gleam. He haggles, offering 2 coppers for the lot. 2 coppers. That's barely a loaf of bread. You counter with 5, channeling Elfrida's calm. He laughs but tosses you 3 coppers, muttering about better snails in York. You pocket the coins, half proud, half insulted. Historians still argue whether snail trading was a niche market or a peasant staple, but in Mudwick, it's a hustle, and you're learning fast. Next, a cook from a nearby manor buys half your basket for 4 coppers, praising their fine spirals. You grin, tossing in a free snail for charm. Then a monk in a drab robe asks if they're Lent approved. You nod, unsure if there's a snail sin you missed. He buys a dozen, muttering about humility. By noon, your pot's nearly empty, and your pouch jingles with 9 coppers, enough for a new cloak maybe. You laugh, imagining Gunther's face when you tell him you outdid his pigs. But the market's not all wins. A rival farmer glares from across the square, his own snail stall suspiciously similar to yours. Trouble's brewing, but you shrug it off. Today's your day. As the sun dips, the market thins, and you sell your last snails to a tanner for a copper and a half-decent knife. You're exhausted, your voice hoarse, but you've got coins and a story to tell. You think back to your enclosure, those eggs you spotted yesterday. If they hatch, you'll be back here maybe with fatter snails or a better pitch. For now, you trudge home, dodging a cart of cabbages. A snail on a market crate catches your eye, its horns raised like it's cheering your hustle. You nod, muttering, "We did all right, pal. Tomorrow you'll check on King Lumpy and dream of bigger markets." Tonight, you're a snail-selling legend, at least in your own muddy boots. Mudwick's morning is a soggy slap, the kind that makes you question every life choice, including snail farming. Your market day haul 9 coppers and a knife jingles in your pouch, proof you're not Mudwick's biggest fool. But as you trudge to your snail pen, the mist curling like a nosy neighbor, you notice something off. The enclosure's fence looks nibbled, and King Lumpy's nowhere near his usual straw pile throne. Today you're facing the grim reality of pest and plague panic as threats to your slimy livestock crawl, hop, and slither into your carefully built world. You grab a stick, mutter a half-hearted prayer, and dive in to save your gooey gold. You start by inspecting the fence. Those thorny twigs you scattered, half are gone, and there's a telltale scatter of tiny teeth marks. Rats. Medieval farms were rat magnets with vermin wiping out grain and livestock faster than a tax collector's visit. You curse, remembering the sparrow that nabbed a snail last week, now rats your pens turning into a buffet. You poke around and find a hole under the wattle just big enough for a bold rodent. King Lumpy's safe, thank the stars, but 2 smaller snails are missing, their shells cracked in the straw. You wince, imagining their slow-motion demise. Here's the quirky bit. Some Mudwick locals hang garlic braids to ward off pests, claiming it repels evil spirits and nibblers. You're not buying the spirit part, but garlic's cheap, so you make a mental note to try it. Then there's the slime issue. One corner of the pen's got a weird yellowish goo, and the snails there are sluggish, their horns barely moving. Plague. You panic, recalling village tales of livestock dropping dead from miasmas. You sniff the air damp, but not foul. Maybe it's mold from all the rain. Historians still argue whether medieval farmers understood disease or just blamed bad luck. But you're not waiting for answers. You scoop out the bad straw, replace it with fresh, and move the sickly snails to a dry spot. They perk up, and you exhale, though you're still eyeing them like they might keel over. Birds are next. A crow's perched on your lean-to, eyeballing your herd like it's planning a heist. You lob a clod of mud, shouting, "Not today, Featherface." It flaps off, but you know it'll be back. You reinforce the thorns and add a net of old twine across the top, hoping it holds. Then you spot slugs, snail's greedy cousins, munching your kale stash. You flick them out, grumbling about freeloaders. It's a losing battle, but you're stubborn. You think back to market day, those coins clinking for your snails. No rat or crows stealing that dream. By noon, you're filthy. Your hands reeking of garlic you bartered from a neighbor. You've patched the fence, cleaned the pen, and even whispered a charm over the sickly snails just in case Mudwick's superstitions are onto something. King Lumpy's back on his pile, horns raised like he's judging your hustle. You laugh, imagining him leading a snail resistance against the rats. Your egg cluster's still there, untouched by pests, and you take it as a sign. If you can keep the vermin at bay, those eggs might hatch into your next big haul. As dusk settles, you sit on your stump, the pen quieter now. You're bone-tired, but the garlic's up, the net's tight, and your snails are munching fresh clover. You're learning pests are part of the game, like rain or taxes. You think of Elfrida, her calm advice about shade and leaves. Maybe she's got a trick for rats. You'll ask tomorrow. For now, you trudge home, the evening chill nipping your ears. A snail on a rock catches your eye. Its trail, a defiant squiggle against the chaos. You nod, muttering, "Keep fighting, buddy." You're not giving up either. Not on your snails, your coins, or your muddy, ridiculous dream. Mudwick's dawn is a damp whisper, the kind that seeps into your bones as you haul yourself to your snail pen. Your garlic braids and twine net seem to be holding off the rats and crows and King Lumpy's back to ruling his straw pile like a slimy emperor. Yesterday's pest panic has you on edge, but your 9 coppers from market day are burning a hole in your pouch. You're ready to level up. And today, you're striking a deal with Mudwick's monks, whose monastery looms on the hill like a stone mother hen. Partnering with them could make your snails the talk of holy kitchens, but it's a gamble. You're not exactly on the guest list for Vespers. You grab a basket of your best snails sling on your cloak and head out the mist, swirling like it's auditioning for a ghost story. The monastery's a half-hour trudge, past fields of barley and a creek that smells faintly of regret. Medieval monasteries were agricultural powerhouses, growing crops and raising livestock, including snails for Lent-friendly feasts. You've heard the monks here are snail enthusiasts, supplying nobles and even distant abbeys. But here's the quirky bit. Rumor has it they anoint their snails with holy water, believing it makes them purer for sacred meals. You chuckle, imagining King Lumpy getting a baptism bet he'd just slime the altar. Still, if the monks want your snails, you're not arguing theology. You reach the monastery gate, a hulking wooden thing carved with grim saints. A novice, barely older than a kid, eyes your basket and asks your business. You stammer something about prime snails for the abbot feeling like a peddler at a king's court. He leads you to Brother Cedric, a wiry monk with a beard like a bramble patch. Cedric inspects your snails, poking one with a finger like it's a relic. "Good shells," he mutters. "But are they godly?" You bite back a laugh. "Godly snails." You assure him they're fat, clean, and ready for any holy pot. He nods but wants a trial batch for the monastery's kitchen. If they pass, you'll supply them weekly. Jackpot, maybe. You leave a dozen snails, including a few of King Lumpy's cousins, and Cedric promises to pay in coin or barley if they're approved. You're thrilled, but nervous monks are picky. And you've seen their feasts, all pomp and parsley. Historians still argue whether monasteries drove the medieval snail trade or just jumped on the bandwagon. But in Mudwick, their blessing could make you a snail farming star. As you trek back, you imagine your snails on a lord's table, maybe served with that garlic sauce you smelled at market. You laugh, picturing Gunter choking on his ale when he hears your monastery approved. Back at your pen, you check your remaining herd. The eggs you spotted are still there, and you spot a new cluster. Your lovebirds are earning their keep. You reinforce the garlic braids, muttering thanks to whatever saint hates rats. The monk's deal could change everything, but you're not counting coins yet. Cedric's godly comment lingers, and you wonder if you should sprinkle water on your snails just in case. Nah, that's Mudwick madness talking. You stick to kale and clover, watching your snails glide like they know they're destined for greatness. A crow circles, and you lob a stick. Nobody's snacking on your holy hustlers. As dusk falls, you sit on your stump. The pen, a quiet kingdom, under its twine net. You're starting to feel like a real farmer, not just a dreamer with a muddy plot. The monastery deal's a long shot, but it's your shot. You think back to market day, those coins clinking for your snails. If the monks come through, you might afford a new shed, or at least stop eating gruel. A snail on the fence catches your eye. Its horns raised like it's toasting your ambition. You nod, muttering, "To holy slime, pal." Tomorrow, you'll wait for Cedric's verdict. But tonight, you're dreaming of snail-fueled glory. Mudwick's winter creeps in like a thief, the air sharp with frost, as you shuffle to your snail pen, your breath puffing in the dawn chill. The monastery deal's still pending. Brother Cedric's testing your snails, and you're trying not to obsess over it. Your garlic braids and twine net are keeping pests at bay, and King Lumpy's still bossing his straw pile. But the cold's changing everything. Your snails are slowing down, their horns barely twitching, and you realize they're gearing up to hibernate. Today's about adapting to the winter slime slowdown, keeping your herd alive through the frost, while you pray the monks don't ghost you. You bundle your cloak tighter, grab a sack of straw, and get to work, the ground crunching under your boots. You check the pen first, and it's a sleepy scene. Most snails are tucked into their shells, glued to the straw or the wattle fence like tiny barnacles. Medieval farmers knew snails hibernated, sealing themselves in a mucus plug to survive winter. But Mudwick's got its own spin. Here's the quirky bit. Some villagers swear you must bury snails in blessed earth to wake them come spring, or they'll curse your crops. You scoff, "Cursed snails." That's tavern talk, but you're nervous. If your herd doesn't survive, your market coins and monk dreams are toast. You poke King Lumpy, who's sealed tight, and mutter, "Don't bail on me, your highness. Your first job is insulation." The lean-to's flimsy, letting in drafts that could freeze your snails solid. You pile extra straw around the pen, creating a thick bed, and scavenge more planks from your shed to reinforce the roof. It's hard work, your fingers numb as you hammer with a rock. Medieval DIY is no joke. Historical records show farmers used straw and cloth to protect livestock in winter, but snails are trickier. Too wet, they rot. Too dry, they shrivel. You sprinkle water lightly, just enough to mimic a damp spring, and hope it's right. Historians still argue whether snail farmers stored their stock indoors or left them outside. But your hut's too small, so outdoor it is. Next, you check the egg clusters. They're still there, nestled in the straw, but you're not sure they'll hatch in this cold. You wrap them in a scrap of wool, feeling like a snail midwife. You laugh, imagining telling Elfrida you're tucking in snail babies. She'd probably nod like it's normal. Food's another worry. Your kale stash is dwindling and the hedgerows are bare. You toss in the last of your clover, but it's clear you'll need to ration. Maybe barter for bran at market. You're learning winter's a test of patience, and snails are the ultimate Zen masters. A crow lands nearby, eyeing your pen, and you chuck a stick, shouting, "Not today, bandit." It flaps off, but the scare reminds you to check the twine net. It's sagging under frost. You tighten it, cursing the cold that's making everything harder. Your pen looks like a fortress now, straw-stuffed and netted, but you're still paranoid. What if the frost's too deep? What if rats find a way in? You think back to market day, those coins clinking for your snails. Losing this herd would gut you, As dusk falls, the pens quiet your snails in their mucus cocoons. You're exhausted, your hands raw from hauling straw, but you've done what you can. The monastery looms in your mind. Cedric's verdict could be your lifeline. You sit on your stump, the frost glittering under a pale moon, and feel a strange calm. Your snails are tough like you. A lone snail, somehow still awake, glides across a plank, its trail a faint shimmer. You nod, muttering, "Hang in there, champ." You trudge home, the cold biting your ears, ready to dream of spring and a pen full of wriggling monk-approved snails. Mudwick's winter has settled in like an uninvited guest, the frost painting your snail pen in brittle whites as you trudge through the morning chill. Your herds hibernating, see sealed in their mucus plugs, with King Lumpy and his crew tucked into straw like tiny shelled hermits. The monastery's still silent. Brother Cedric's verdict on your snails feels like a distant star, but you're holding on your 9 market coppers, a reminder of what's possible. Today you're grappling with the slow grind of building your reputation as Mudwick's snail guy. Fame's a stretch, but a nod from the tavern crowd would be nice. You grab a stick to check the pen, pull your cloak tight against the cold, and set out the air sharp with the tang of frozen earth. Your pen's a fortress of straw and twine, holding firm against crows and rats. You poke the straw, ensuring the snails are snug, and spot those egg clusters still wrapped in wool. They're your future if spring ever comes. Medieval villages thrived on reputation. Farmers known for good crops or livestock could barter better deals. You're not there yet. Mudwick still sees you as the dreamer with the muddy plot. Here's the quirky bit. Some locals believe a snail farmer's luck rubs off, like touching their slime brings good fortune. You laugh, imagining Gunter asking to pet King Lumpy for a gambling win. Still, if it boosts your name, you're not complaining. You head to the tavern, hoping to spread word of your snail hustle. The place is a smoky haze of ale and gossip, and you spot Elfrida nursing a mug. You slide in, offering a copper for her advice. She's impressed you've kept your herd alive through frost, and her nod feels like a badge. "Keep at it," she says. "Folk notice quiet work." You mention the monastery deal, and her eyes widen. Monks are Mudwick's gold standard. You leave feeling bolder and try a pitch. "Best snails in Mudwick. Ask the monks." A few drunks chuckle, but one farmer, red-faced Rolf, buys it, promising to spread the word. Score 1 for snail PR. Back at the pen, you check for trouble. A rat's been sniffing around, leaving tracks, but your garlic braid's held. You add more muttering thanks to Elfrida's wisdom. The village is starting to whisper your name, but it's slow. Mudwick's skeptical, and last year's turnip blight made everyone cagey. Historians still argue whether snail farming was a respected trade or a quirky sideline, but you're leaning into it. You think of market day, those coins clinking for your snails. If Rolf talks you up, maybe more will buy. You laugh, imagining a ballad about snail farmer. You though it'd probably rhyme with goo. By noon, you're bartering at market for bran to stretch your snail feed. The baker who bought your snails last time asks how your herd's faring. You brag about the monastery trial, and he nods impressed. Word spreading, even if it's just a trickle. You swap a copper for a sack of bran and head home feeling like you're carving a place in Mudwick's muddy heart. Your pens quiet the snails dreaming in their shells. You sprinkle bran near the eggs, hoping it'll tempt spring hatchlings. A crow circles, and you glare, no one's crashing this slow burn glow up. As dusk paints the sky in purples, you sit on your stump, the frost crunching underfoot. Your reputation's growing, one tavern nod at a time. You think of Brother Cedric, praying his monks love your snails. A lone snail, somehow awake, inches across the fence, its trail a faint glimmer. You nod, muttering, "Keep shining, pal." You're not famous yet, but you're not invisible either. Tomorrow, you'll push harder, maybe bribe Rolf with ale. For now, you trudge home the cold, nipping your nose, dreaming of a village that chants your name, or at least stops snickering. Mudwick's winter clings like damp wool, the frost dusting your snail pen as you shuffle through the morning chill, your breath fogging in the pale light. Your reputation's inching up. Red-faced Rolf's been talking you up at the tavern, and the baker's asking after your snails, but the monastery's silence about your trial batch is louder than a church bell. Your herds, still hibernating King Lumpy and his crew sealed in their mucus plugs, and those egg clusters are your ticket to spring profits if you can keep them safe. Today, you're diving into Mudwick's snail lore and legends, the wild tales that swirl around these slimy crawlers like mist over the bog. You grab a stick to check the pen, wrap your cloak against the cold, and head out the air crisp with frozen grass and distant wood smoke. You start at the pen, poking the straw to ensure your snails are snug. The garlic braids and twine net are holding no rat tracks today. As you work, you recall tavern chatter about snail myths, Mudwick's full of them. Medieval Europe saw snails as symbols of patience and resurrection, their ability to seal up and revive inspiring monks and poets. But here's the quirky bit. Some villagers swear snails carry messages from the dead, their slime trails tracing ghostly words. You snort, imagining King Lumpy channeling your late aunt's recipe for gruel. Still, the idea's got you curious. Maybe these tales could boost your sales pitch. Buy my snails, they'll whisper your fortune, you laugh, picturing Gunter spitting his ale. You head to the village square, where old Widow Agnes Mudwick's unofficial lore keeper holds court by the well. She's got a face like a pickled apple, but a memory sharper than your market day knife. You offer a copper for her stories, and she spins a tale about a snail that led a lost monk to a hidden spring, saving his abbey from drought. They're God's scribes. She insists writing truths we're too dull to read. You nod half convinced and ask about snail powers. She claims their mucus heals fevers and their shells ground to powder ease joint pain. You're skeptical, but note it, apothecaries might pay for that. Back at the pen, you eye your snails wondering if they're hiding mystic secrets. You spot a trail that looks vaguely like an M for Mudwick, or just messy slime. You shake your head, blaming Agnes's tales for your daydreams. Historians still argue whether snail lore was genuine belief or marketing hype, but in Mudwick, it's both. You decide to lean into it, planning a market pitch about healing snails without going full charlatan. You check the egg clusters, still cozy in their wool, and sprinkle bran nearby, whispering, "Write me a fortune, kids." A crow caws, and you lob a stick. Nobody's eating your prophetic livestock. By noon, you're at the tavern, testing your lore angle. You tell Rolf about Agnes's stories, adding a wink about snails curing aches. He laughs, but says his cousin's apothecary might buy shells. Score. You're learning Mudwick's superstitions. Our currency, use them right. and your reputation grows. You think back to market day, those coins clinking for your snails. If you can spin these legends without sounding like a fraud, you might afford a new shed. You grin, imagining a ballad about mystic snail, you though it'd probably rhyme with goo again. As dusk falls, the pen's a quiet shrine, your snails dreaming in their shells. You're starting to see why Mudwick loves its snail tales. They're a spark in the winter gloom. You sit on your stump, the frost glittering, and feel a strange warmth. The monastery's verdict looms. But for now, you're weaving your own legend. A snail on the fence glints its trail, a silvery squiggle. You nod, muttering, "Keep scribbling, pal." You trudge home the cold, pinching your ears, ready to dream of spring markets and snails that might just whisper your name to the stars. Mudwick's winter bites harder now, the frost crusting your snail pen like a baker's bad icing. You trudge out at dawn, your cloak no match for the chill that sneaks past your collar. The village is buzzing about your snails. Rolf's cousin wants shells for his apothecary, and Agnes's lore has folks whispering about your mystic herd. Even the monastery's silence feels less ominous, like Brother Cedric's just taking his time. Your snails are still hibernating. King Lumpy sealed tight in his mucus plug, but those egg clusters keep your spring dreams alive. Today, though, trouble's brewing. A rival snail farmer's eyeing your turf, and you're caught in a feud stickier than slime. You grab a stick to check the pen, your breath fogging, and brace for Mudwick's version of drama. You spot the rival at the pen's edge, one-eyed Wat, a wiry farmer with a smirk sharper than your market day knife. His own snail stall popped up last market suspiciously close to yours, and now he's sniffing around your fence. Medieval villages were hotbeds of petty rivalries, land disputes, and crop thefts were common as mud. Wat's no mastermind, but he's trouble. Here's the quirky bit. Rumor has it he paints his snails' shells with ochre to make them look exotic. You scoff exotic. They're still Mudwick mud crawlers. Still, his painted snails sold well, and you're not thrilled he's scoping your setup. You confront him, keeping it civil. Lost. What you ask, leaning on your stick. He grins, claiming he's just admiring your pen. You notice his eyes linger on your garlic braids and twine net bet he's stealing ideas. You shoo him off, but he drops a jab. Heard the monks passed on your snails. Tough luck. Your stomach twists, gossip or truth. You shrug, saying they're still tasting. My snails outshine your painted fakes. He laughs and saunters off, but you're rattled. You check the pen, paranoid he tampered with something. Everything's intact, eggs safe, but Wat's got you on edge. You head to the tavern to gauge the damage. Elfrida's there, and you ask if Wat's been talking smack. She nods, says he's bragging his snails are noble grade, while yours are peasant slop. You grit your teeth, tempted to paint King Lumpy's shell, just to mess with Wat. Instead, you lean on Agnes's lore, telling the tavern crowd your snail's slime cured a tanner's cough. It's a stretch, but they eat it up, and Rolf promises to shun Wat's stall. Historians still argue whether medieval farmers sabotaged rivals or just competed fair, but Mudwick's not above a little shade. You're playing clean for now. Back at the pen, you double-check the garlic and net muttering curses at Wat. Your snails don't care, gliding in their sleepy shells, but you're fired up. You think of market day, those coins clinking for your unpainted, honest snails. Wat's ochre trick might fool some, but you're betting on quality. You laugh, imagining a snail duel, King Lumpy versus Wat's painted champ, racing at a glacial pace. To spite Wat, You sprinkle extra bran near the eggs, whispering, "Grow fat, kids, we'll show him." A crow circles, and you lob a stick. Nobody's crashing this feud, feathered or not. As dusk settles, the pen's a frosty fortress. Your snail's oblivious to village politics. You sit on your stump, the cold seeping through, and plot your next move. Watt's a pest, but he's lit a fire. You'll outfarm him, outsmart him, maybe even outlore him with Agnes's tales. The monastery's verdict looms, and if Cedric comes through, Watt's painted snails will be yesterday's news. A snail on the fence glints its trail, a defiant squiggle. You nod, muttering, "Keep it real, pal." You trudge home the frost, crunching, ready to dream of crushing Watt's hustle with the slimiest comeback Mudwick's ever seen. Mudwick's winter grips. Tight the frost, glazing your snail pen like a miser's heart. But you're out at dawn, your cloak barely holding back the chill. One-eyed Watt's feud lingers like a bad smell, and the village is still whispering about your mystic snails, thanks to Agnes's tales. Brother Cedric's monastery verdict remains a ghost, but your 9 market coppers and those egg clusters keep your hopes flickering. King Lumpy's hibernating, ruling his straw pile from inside his mucus plug, and today you're pondering the legacy of your slime-soaked journey. What's this snail farm really worth to Mudwick to you? You grab a stick, check the pen, and settle in the air sharp with frozen earth and the weight of your own dreams. You poke the straw, ensuring your herd snug. The garlic braids and twine net still hold no sign of Watt's meddling. Medieval farmers rarely thought of legacy survival trumped sentiment, but Mudwick's different. Your snails are more than a hustle. They're a story woven into the village's muddy fabric. Here's the quirky bit: some locals now call you Slime Hand, a nickname born from tavern jests about your gooey work. You laugh, imagining it carved on a stone, Slime Hand snail, Lord of Mudwick. It's silly, but it sticks, and you're starting to like it. You wander to the village, seeking Elfrida's take. She's by the well, her eyes crinkling as she calls you Slime Hand. "You've changed things," she says. "Folk talk snails now, not just turnips." She's right. Your market pitches monk deal even. Watt's rivalry have made snails Mudwick's quiet obsession. You think of the eggs in your pen, potential heirs to King Lumpy's throne. If they hatch, you could expand, maybe supply the next village over. Historians still argue whether snail farming shaped medieval economies or was just a fad, but in Mudwick, you're proof it's real. Your 9 coppers bought a new cloak, and Rolf's cousin wants more shells for his apothecary. That's legacy, small but yours. Back at the pen, you sit on your stump, the frost biting your fingers. You fought birds' rats and Watt's painted fakes, all for these slow crawlers. Why? It's not just coins. It's the stubborn pride of building something in Mudwick's muck. You recall market day, those coins clinking, and Agnes's tale of snails as God's scribes. Maybe they've written your story too, a nobody who made slime matter. You check the eggs, still wrapped in wool, and whisper, "Carry it on, kids." A crow circles, but you don't bother throwing a stick. Your pen's a fortress, and you're done fearing thieves. As noon fades, you reflect on Mudwick's future. If the monks buy in, you'll be set. If not, you'll keep hustling. Watt can paint his snails all he wants. You've got Slime Hand grit. You laugh, imagining a ballad about your farm rhyming with goo as always. Your snails, sealed in their shells, are your partners in this quiet rebellion against a hard world. You stand, knees creaking, and spot a lone snail awake. Despite the cold, its trail a faint glimmer on the fence. You nod, muttering, "Write my name, pal." You're not done dreaming. The frost softens as evening creeps over Mudwick. The sky, a gentle bruise of purples and grays. You sit by your pen, the world slowing the air, wrapping you in a cool, forgiving hush. Your snails rest in their straw, their shells catching the last light like whispered secrets. You've fought. You've dreamed, and you've carved a place in this muddy village. Slime hand with your stubborn herd. The eggs hold spring's promise. A new chapter waiting to unfold. Let the cold fade, let Watt's smirks dissolve. Let the monastery's silence drift away. You're here with your snails, and that's enough. Picture their trails, silver threads weaving through the dark, guiding you to rest. Close your eyes. Let the hum of night settle and drift into dreams where slime shines brighter than gold. Sleep now, soft and slow, like a snail gliding home.